everyone. Welcome to The Thoughtful Entrepreneur. I am your host, Jen Amos, and today I have with me Jeroen Corthout, who is the co-founder of Salesflare, and he is the podcast host of Founder Coffee. Jeroen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in these interesting times in 2020, I always feel like it's important to ask, how are you doing? How are you holding up in this, what we call nowadays the new normal?
I'd say relatively good. I don't have to complain. Like my family is all relatively okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, a few people got sick, but nobody really had anything bad. And company is doing really well in general. It weighs a bit, of course, not being able to see friends and family the same way as before, but it's not terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I often like to say that if there's any time in history to be in a pandemic, it's this one, because at least we have technology and we can, be safe in our homes.
Exactly.
And everything. So I like to look at the silver lining, although I don't like to minimize what is going on. I like to focus on the good side and, count my blessings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same thing. I totally agree. I'm so happy that we can still see people online, and if that wouldn't be possible, it would just be my wife and I here full days, just the two of us. I mean, mm-hmm. Not that it's not enjoyable, mm-hmm. but at some point you just feel like getting out,
Yeah, absolutely. How has your relationship been with your wife adjusting to this? Since I think about my husband as well, and how we pretty much are the only people we hang out with each other. So how has that experience been like for you and your wife?
Good. I must say, I think especially in the beginning, the extra time we had with each other was really, really nice. Mm-hmm. We're together now for I think about 10 years. I should probably count better. So we had the luxury of already knowing each other very well before closing ourselves in the same house, let's say. Mm-hmm. We didn't really have any big issues or fights, the usual ones, I would say. So
yeah,
good.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. And that's always great to hear, because I think, in a lot of the conversations I've had this year so far, a lot of it revolves around kind of going beneath that layer of professionalism and talking about the home life and what that's been like, because for a lot of people, everything has merged. The kids are mm-hmm. home, the spouse is home, everyone's home. And so, we can't just separate that anymore. And so that's why I felt like it was important to ask. But it sounds like for you, Jeroen, you and your wife sound like you're doing just fine.
Yeah, if you sometimes hear some snoring on the background, that's not me, it's not my wife, it's our dog. She's sleeping and she has this kind of snoring sound that sometimes is quite loud. She's like 5 meters away from me, but you might hear it.
I love it. I think that's very normal too. I've had to learn to, I have a dog as well, and he's actually mm-hmm. afraid of the big exercise balls that you can sit on. And so when I have to keep him out of the room, I just put that ball right in front of my office door and he never comes in. But before that, he would just paw on the door, and I'm doing these interviews. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I hope the guest doesn't hear this.
Yeah, that's handy.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have a few things here, and when she's snoring too loudly and she's close, I can throw it to her, and then she wakes up and she's like, oh, what did I do? But now she's really, really far, so I cannot stop her from snoring.
Love it. It is what it is. It is what it is. And that's the reality of our life today. I am curious, Jeroen, have you worked from home for the majority of your business, or, what has kind of your work setup been like?
So with Salesflare, we've always been remote with our customers, at least for the last 5 years, mm-hmm. As we sell our software internationally. We're based in Antwerp in Belgium, mm-hmm. But we sell to companies all over the world. I would say probably about 40% of those are in North America, another 40% scattered across Europe, and then 20% in other places. A lot of those in Australia. So that's always been remote, but as a team, we've always worked from the same room. Mm-hmm. Basically, we always believed that was a good way of keeping the communication lines very short, being able to move very fast together. And that sort of has changed, of course. We had to move everything online. Everybody's in their own home.
Yeah.
Already for more than 6 months now. And there we had to make some changes in how we organize our internal communication, on how we make sure that everybody stays motivated. A bunch of things we had to change along the way to make sure that everything keeps running like before, or even better.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you feel like has been the most advantageous thing since, let's say, you and your team had to start working remotely?
I would say focus. It's much easier when you define yourself, when you want to talk to people, when you don't want to talk to people. You can very easily enter under focus mode. Like in the office, I would put on my headphones and tell everyone, don't disturb me. But that wouldn't even work. Then people would be like start waving at me, and I'd be like, no, I'm focusing. Right. And when you're alone at home, then that becomes so much easier. And especially we are a software company. So for our developers, that is a major win. Of course, on the other hand, the flip side is that there's not many people around. So sometimes it's a bit harder to keep sort of that energy and that motivation going. So we tried a lot of things already to deal with that. But that's that then of course is the disadvantage of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's it's always a double-edged sword, I think, when things change, because it seems like things are getting better, but then at the expense of losing something that probably was more beneficial. And you were talking about how there's more synergy and there's more maybe accountability when you are around your team. However, the focus is a little bit harder, but if you flip that and work from home and you have more focus, but you don't have that camaraderie. And so it's hard to maybe be as motivated. And so, I think when it comes to business, there's really no right or wrong way to do it. It's just a matter of adjusting to what's going on and just focusing on the good side of it, I think, and trying to be innovative to compensate for the things that you no longer have, which in this case is that camaraderie that you usually have when you're in person.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Fully agree.
So tell me a little bit about your background. What were you up to before you started Salesflare, and what led you to starting Salesflare?
Yeah. So previous to Salesflare, I worked in a marketing consultancy that actually used Salesforce internally. Salesforce was my very first CRM. I took it very seriously. Like, people told me all the time that it would help me organize my sales. I believe that. I really tried to use it for sales follow-up. But then I noticed that I didn't really manage to do that. I didn't manage to make it work for sales follow-up. And I saw that actually for my sales colleagues, it was the same thing. Our CEO really loved it, and I'm sure he still loves it for doing reporting. But as the salespeople, we didn't really get much further than entering our sales opportunities in there. So they would end up in the reporting and sometimes add a contact to add them to the newsletter or something. But it didn't really help us sell, which I thought at that point, that's what a CRM is for, right? Like you organize your sales and somehow it will make you better at selling. And that it's not just a sort of management reporting system. I didn't do anything with that insight for a few years until my co-founder and I were working on another software company. We had a big list of leads. We went to a conference in Vegas, which was a big IBM conference. We sold software that was compatible with IBM software. And we had all these leads to follow up. And I knew that Salesforce wasn't going to help us with organizing that. So we had a good look around. We looked at different CRMs. We looked at building our own system. And what we always found is that all these systems look great, but they always failed at some point. And that was actually with us. So because we didn't really manage to fill them out like we were expected to fill them out, we didn't have the necessary discipline constantly to be these perfect data input robots, let's say.
Right.
And that it sort of felt like we were expected to be these kind of robots, but we weren't. And we quickly figured that we weren't the only ones, because which salesperson likes entering data into a CRM?
No one.
And yeah, and then we saw that actually the data that we were inputting, it was even really dumb, because we were working on one system, and then basically documenting that or duplicating that data in another system. So imagine you're sending an email, and then in your CRM you say, I sent an email, and then you book a meeting, and then you say, I booked a meeting, and then you call, and then you say, I called. It felt very stupid, and we thought, what if we build a system that sort of sits on top of the data that already exists? So it connects with your email inbox. It sees who you're in contact with. It creates these people automatically. It pulls in email signatures to know what's their phone number, what's their address, and all that. It pulls in some more information from social media. Then it connects to your calendars. It says, okay, when did we meet? What was it about? All this kind of things. So emails and meetings are also already in there. Connects with the phone to put in calls. Connects with company databases to get some more information about the company, so you don't have to Google that. And that was in April, May 2014. We started building that. It took a while longer than we thought to build this kind of system. But now, already more than 6 years working on this. We have over 2,000 companies using our software, and it grew into a B2b Sales CRM for small and medium-sized businesses, mostly agencies on the one hand, like marketing agencies and software development companies, and a lot of fast-growing tech startups, I would say, on the other hand. And it's now a CRM that is, one, easy to use. Secondly, it automates a lot of the data for you. And third, the point that I started with in the beginning, it really helps you follow up. So it actively helps you to remind you, like, hey, follow up this person. Don't forget to answer that email. Don't forget to add meeting notes here. And then all the rest just happens for you. So it keeps track of all the stuff for you. So our biggest mission, actually, when we started Salesflare, was to help salespeople focus on their customers with a very easy and automated system, so they can perfectly follow up with everyone and without disappointing any customers or spending any time on robotic tasks. And that's still our biggest mission today.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. You know, in the last decade of me being self-employed and even working with my husband and his own way of trying to keep track, we very much have those same problems of like, okay, I sent an email, I got to write down I sent an email. I sent a text, I got to write down I sent a text. I got to input their social media, I got to input all their information. And so I think what you're doing is very innovative. And I'm thinking that, you know, maybe for a lot of salespeople, and I think about myself, that sometimes I don't want to sell because I don't want to do all the data entry. You know, I don't want to do all the recording. And so it sounds like, you know, what you've done is really cut out that excuse of data entry, essentially, and automating it so that the salesperson can focus on what they do best.
Yeah, exactly. And make sure that CRM actually fulfills its promise. A lot of salespeople also, they sort of like their boss says, you need to input the data into the CRM, and then they say, like, what would you rather have me do, sell or fill out the CRM? And we don't think it should be like the one or the other. Actually, the CRM should help you sell. But somehow things evolved in such a way that CRMs don't really help sell, and we try to fix that with the minimal amount of data input.
Yeah, I think that a lot of CRMs, now that I think about it, it's really about documentation, and it's maybe with the assumption that you like data entry, or you're going to maybe have an assistant manually do it for you. But if you are really the sole person that has to do the sales and has to document it, you know, it's like you're asking someone to do two jobs at once, and it's almost counterproductive to expect them to do that. And so again, with Salesflare, I think it's really awesome that you have really automated that follow-up part, and, you know, really just making it easier for people to just be like, just to have a software such as yours to just do the work for you in terms of data entry.
Yeah, if you have to hire someone to do the data entry into a software system, then I think you know already that there's something off. And,
Right. Yeah, that's a clear sign.
The sales guy is doing the sales and then send some stuff over, and then that person inputs it. It's also a huge waste of money, I think, to have to hire someone for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It just seems counterintuitive, counterproductive to be able to do that, to have someone else. I remember one of the last offices I worked at, the assistant was dedicated to just filling out that CRM system, essentially. So it is interesting. And tell me a little bit about, tell me, what are you most proud of, having run Salesflare for 6 years now? Like, what is it that you're most proud of with your company so far?
I think it's on 3 levels that I'm proud. There's like on 3 levels that we mostly build. So one is our team. I'm really happy with the way our team works, the culture that we have, the way we work together. Some people that have left the team, what they're doing now, like how it's worked into their personal development. That's really awesome to see, because it's the people with which you work every day. I'm really proud of the customers we have, how happy they are. Not all of them are like extremely happy, of course. There's like the super fans, and then the ones that are a bit more doubtful. And but in general, I'm if you look, for instance, on G2.com, we're ranked 4th easiest to use CRM now, and 1st and easiest to implement. Awesome. And in general, in the ranking, I think 11th, and that's across 600 plus CRMs. I lost count a bit. And then product wise, that's actually something I really enjoy also. That's sort of why you start a software company, is because you like building software and making a system that doesn't just like work towards the user, but also really works in the back. That's very satisfying to see how something evolves from an idea to something scrappy, to something slightly better, to then really something that can compete with big software products.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jeroen, thank you so much for taking time to talk about your company today and where you're at with you and your team. Let's say for the entrepreneur or small business owner that is aspiring to be a software company, or is growing, what piece of advice do you want to share with that entrepreneur?
I had another thing in mind before you start asking the question.
Yeah, please.
It's something that started coming to me in the last few days, and it's especially relevant during the pandemic. Somehow with all this remote selling and all that, and with just being behind your computer, you can be so much more productive and focused, and I can really do a lot of things in a day. But what I've been noticing recently is that I started losing a bit of motivation because it all sort of started to become a routine and quick and yeah. And I figured that it makes some sense to slow down sometimes. Like if you're doing a meeting with people, to make some extra time for small talk, to connect better, to take things to an even higher level, to really apply more care, because otherwise, especially if we all spend the time in our homes, it very quickly becomes this drag. And time just flies by without us knowing what we've done. And so I came to the conclusion in the past few days that I really need to focus more on that. And sometimes just slowing down, appreciate things more, and I think that shows in a lot of ways when you really focus on that.
Yeah, I like that, Jeroen, because even for me, I set up a separate calendar just for people to have a casual call with me. You know, it's like, hey, no agenda, like, let's just catch up. Let's just see where you're at. Let's just, you know, do like a mental health check-in. And so I think that's important. Yeah. And I think if there's anything that the pandemic has taught us is to slow down and focus on our humanity again. You know, we're not just workers. We're not just workaholics, you know, like we have lives, we have feelings, we have dreams, and we can, you know, go back to that again. And so I really like that you shared that. Before we go, any final advice or anything else you want to share to our small business owners and entrepreneurs listening to The Thoughtful Entrepreneur?
I have a lot of pieces of advice I could share, but I don't know what would be particularly useful. But maybe to connect to what we just said, especially during the current situation, when you talked about bringing back that humanity a bit. I think it's a great time to explore being more human, being more personable. It's especially necessary as well as we're all spending our days in Zoom calls. To explore what it means to become a bit more human versus this very formal way of communicating that we're used to. And this applies to many things, especially in sales. Where in remote selling situation, you're not in the same room with customers anymore, and there's always like a few screens away. And if you don't do that extra effort to be extra human, you cannot build connections.
That's why it's been more acceptable when you hear a dog snoring in the background, or you hear, you know, the baby accidentally walking in the room and, you know, they figured out how to open the doorknob. You know, I think like it's okay now to do that because, I haven't broke it down yet. I think in the future we'll have sociologists really analyze this time. But until then, there is something that, you know, you do feel like a human again, I think, with all of these things that have been perceived as imperfections in the workplace, like, you know, not bringing your kid or dog to work, or, you know, making sure that you're in a very focused environment. And so, Jeroen, I appreciate you sharing all of that. And with that said, I want to thank you again so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure having you join us here on The Thoughtful Entrepreneur.
Thank you. It was fun. Thank you.
Yes. And to our listeners, once again, that is Jeroen Corthout. He is a co-founder of Salesflare, and he's the podcast host of Founder Coffee. You can learn more about his company, Salesflare, at salesflare.com. With that said, thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode.